Every November, we recognize Diabetes Awareness Month, which is a time to talk about prevention, management, and support for all people living with diabetes. And this year, World Diabetes Day's theme is around diabetes and well-being at work, which we talked about in lots of different podcasts. But today we're really talking about how it impacts people living with diabetes, given that the majority of our day is spent at work. Here's what the numbers will tell us. 7 in 10 people living with diabetes are of working age. 4 in 5 experience what's called diabetes burnout, the emotional, physical exhaustion that comes from managing a chronic condition day in and day out. And according to Sun Life, employees with diabetes, living with diabetes, miss 2 to 10 more work days per year than those without. So, on average, this can mean somebody is missing up to 8.5 days per year for those living with diabetes. And for those living with complications as a result of diabetes, this significantly goes up. So today we do need to talk about this because this isn't just, missing work. This is also strain on somebody's emotional well-being. This is their time away from family. So today we wanted to talk about this, what the impact of this is for people living with diabetes, as well as what we can do about that. So I'm joined by two of my colleagues today, and we are gonna talk about this. We're gonna jump right in on this. So research shows that employees with chronic conditions like diabetes experience presenteeism, being at work but maybe just not feeling their best. This can be from multiple different reasons: fatigue, blood sugars, or emotional stress. So I'm going to put this to you, Roshni. You're a certified diabetes educator, but yeah, based on your experience, what are some of the biggest challenges that people face in the workplace when they're living with diabetes or any other chronic condition, really?
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. That's such an important question. And I think with the theme Diabetes Month, which is focusing on well-being in the workplace, we're really looking at how this is very multidimensional. So when we think about any kind of chronic condition, it's not just the nutrition that we talk about as dietitians. It's we're looking at the stress, the sleep, the physical activity, and then medications if we are on those for diabetes management, and just finding a way to juggle all that on top of a busy workday can be super overwhelming. So, you mentioned that burnout, and that's such a huge piece of something that we really do want to bring awareness around and also give some practical strategies for today. And when we do look into the research, employees with diseases, for example, like diabetes, not only face more missed work days, but you talked about that presenteeism. So when we think about this, we really want to make sure that we are providing our clients and any individuals who are listening to this podcast, who may even be caregivers or even employers, just some ideas on how we can think about this within a workplace environment.
Yeah, I think that's really important to point out. And Neil's talked about that, Roshni, too. And even thinking about just the juggling, right? Of not just all the medications, the nutrition and stuff, but also the other things that come with the workplace, right? Like deadlines or shift workers or lots of different pieces on top of things, maybe like families or friends or caregivers. If all of a sudden that becomes almost like another job on top of a job. Um, so Matthew, maybe how do we get around this? We're managing a job on top of a job. What are some strategies for people for this?
I think an important starting point is just recognizing, acknowledging just how much time and how much effort and everything is involved here. As you mentioned at the beginning, there is the common experience of diabetes burnout or diabetes distress, where due to all of these added needs in someone's day, on top of, like you said, already working, already having other responsibilities like caretaking, other just normal day to day life stuff. I think the first piece is just recognizing that feeling stress or burnout due to all of this is normal and isn't you doing something wrong or doing a poor job of managing things or just personal time management issues. It's inherently, objectively, just a lot of time and effort added to your day that other people don't have. I think that is the key place to start. And then, if we're thinking of some key strategies when we're trying to manage all of this, I think one very important piece is just taking things one step at a time. If you recently, especially if you recently received a diagnosis, it can be a very stressful time, and it's a lot, and there's a lot that you may have read or heard or been told that you should or need to be doing, but all of that at once can be a ton. So it's important to just take it one step at a time, and then go from starting with one thing, starting with one goal from your initial appointment, and then just doing that one at a time, so that we are not then adding so much on ourselves at once. I think that's a key place to start.
Yeah, I just wanted to take team on Matthew mentioned that self-care piece, and that is super, super important. And often when we are busy and on the go, it can be really difficult to prioritize that self-care. So often I think about self-care like medicine, like your medication. And so when we're in that super stressful time and deadlines are approaching in your workplace, it can be really difficult to think about self-care in those moments. But if we schedule that time as a non negotiable, could even be 5 minutes. And sometimes I kind of have this conversation with clients saying self care doesn't have to be extravagant. It could be one or two things that you're doing within 5 minutes, whether it's deep breathing for you or, stepping outside for a quick walk or making a nice cup of tea, whatever kind of helps you unwind in those few moments can really add up over time. And so I always talk about that piece of quality over quantity and just kind of taking that moment to find those few minutes of self care can make a huge difference. As Matthew mentioned, those small pieces go a really long way.
Yeah. And I think that piece there about the protected time is vital. We realistically, if things are different at work day to day, or maybe just not very flexible with things that can just come up from time to time, I think that it is important to keep things as consistent or as protected as we realistically can, which looks different for everyone. For some people, it might be, for example, like maybe you are able to block off a certain meal time consistently, but other things might vary. If you're able to protect even just that 30 minutes for a meal, then that can go a long way in regular eating to help manage with your diabetes. If, let's say, there maybe is generally a range, maybe it's a slightly bigger range of when you can normally have that lunchtime, then I think that's another piece where we want to, let's say, protect at least, let's say, 30 minutes in this maybe 90-minute range that we generally have some time for that. So just keeping things as consistent as we realistically can, ideally with protected times or protected maybe windows of time for some of those meals or snacks.
Yeah, I think both of you spoke on some really important pieces. And the piece, as a diabetes educator myself, we think about, from the first point in time when somebody is diagnosed of that's a lot of information, right? Depending if there's all of a sudden, blood sugar testing, all of a sudden that's new, taking medications is new, maybe needing to be a little bit more consistent with eating and all of that feels very new. And these are all skills that we just don't have. And we have to take time to learn them. And both of you spoke about such an important piece of starting really, really small. It might just be focusing on one aspect of that and then seeing how that kind of fits. But Matthew, a really important piece. And I just want our listeners to remember that it's okay also to have these feelings of like, this feels like a lot. This, to know that it's very normal because these skills are a lot. The management, day to day management is a lot, and it's okay to feel um, overwhelmed by it for sure. And that's what I kind of want to move into this next piece because both of you kind of mentioned this. I know it's known in the diabetes world quite a bit is really called burnout when we add, and all of a sudden what's called diabetes burnout. We know that 4 in 5 people living with diabetes will feel, emotionally exhausted, this constant management day to day. But yeah, let's talk about what that is. Because I know in other podcasts we've talked about, workplace burnout. But yeah, what is diabetes burnout? Roshni, do you want to start us off here?
Yeah, so with diabetes burnout, it's, as you mentioned, Andrea, quite common, unfortunately, and it's just Something that comes up when we're having to balance all of these pieces, when we have this medication that, whether it's insulin or you're just on this diabetes medication that you have to take at meal times or before meal times, and you're balancing your daily routines, just that pressure of having to think about your health on a constant basis can be super overwhelming. And with anyone, when we have a lot that our brain is going through and we're not taking that time for self-care, that can lead to that burnout. And so finding ways, like, of course it will always be difficult, managing any chronic disease. It's never going to be a walk in the park. And I always say everyone's journey looks different, and we have these ebbs and flows with any kind of chronic disease. But if we kind of figure out a routine of, like, we, as I mentioned before, we do this no matter what. We go for a walk after a meal no matter what. Yes, it might help blood sugars, but it might improve stress. And finding things that, target a few things at once might be something. And so, like I said, those small pieces make a big difference when we think about managing diabetes burnout, and just understanding as well where it shows up in your day. And this is often something, as a diabetes educator, we work on with our clients, of saying, let's do some daily reflections. Let's figure out where you feel the most stress in your day. Do you feel most overwhelmed at the end of the day? Do you feel like it's, midday when you're kind of balancing meal times? Where can we create that space and maybe some more self care opportunities, or make things a little bit less overwhelming in your routine? And, working with your healthcare team, I think having this conversation can also be helpful, especially when it's something like a medication timing, or maybe a type of medication, or you're just overwhelmed with the number of medications. Speak about this with your doctor and your certified diabetes educator, and there's always a plan we can come up with. So never feel like you have to kind of power through this burnout. There's always a solution.
Yeah. Matthew, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I fully agree that it's very important that we try to, yeah, starting reflection is a good place to start when it comes to what are maybe the more stressful or distressing aspects of this. What time of day, what day of the week, what maybe period of the month or period of the year. Based on these patterns, does it seem like this tends to be more of an issue when it comes to the stressful aspects? And this can help with knowing what you can expect coming up, how things tend to go seasonally, challenges, even just recognizing what maybe even a normal day is a little more stressful or impactful than you think. So I agree that starting with reflection there is a really good starting point. And then when it comes to, once we've recognized the issue and it comes to now working towards things to put into place there, I think this goes back to what we said earlier about starting with just one thing at a time. What do I do to take the next step in the management of this? You may be able to come up with a list of like 10 right away, but it's about what can I prioritize now to just be the next step in this direction? Am I going to start with maybe it's starting with the thing I find the most simple. Maybe it's starting with the thing that's having the biggest impact right now and working on that. It's really up to you and your discussion with your provider on what makes sense as a next step, but taking it one step at a time, I think, is key. And as we're doing that, we want to consider in these reflections, like what role does maybe rest play here, sleep, relaxation, overall self care, how much maybe nutrition aspects, physical activity aspects. There's a lot of different components when it comes to overall chronic disease management and diabetes management, but it's about balancing that again, but at a pace that works for us. So maybe right now we're more motivated to become a little more physically active and we want to start there. Maybe it's more so working on our sleep. Maybe it's something else, but recognizing that we can take one step at a time, although it is a difficult balancing act.
Yeah, both of you touched on really good pieces. And another piece that I want to point out too that both of you touched on, and I think we can probably all agree on this one, is, this is diabetes is the club that nobody really wants to be in, right? So when we think about this, that's sometimes where we can go, oh, like we're supposed to be managing all of this on our own, taking all of this stress and management on our own. And this is something, no matter what your journey is to reach out for support. Just like we would if we were feeling overwhelmed in other areas of our life, this is a place you can do that. Hey, you know what, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. Is there some way, either a family member, caregiver, support, friends group, community group, um any, hey, you know what, can I get a little bit of help and support for that? This is not a journey that you need to do on your own. And surrounding yourself with people who can be supportive can also help alleviate that, or just go, hey, you know what, I'm just feeling a little bit burnt out by this, what could I do? And I think both of you brought that piece about awareness, right? Sometimes we're so lost in the thick of things, it's hard to know which way is what direction, right? So leaning on people around you to support you for sure. Okay, Roshni, we're going to go into this next piece with you because we've got the individual side of it, and you know, when we're talking about the workplace, is even just the environment itself of the workplace can be challenging for people living with diabetes. And we've got stigma that kind of is associated with that. So do you want to speak a little bit about that, Roshni, of why somebody might feel that way or where it might show up in the workplace?
Yeah. So the stigma with diabetes, it's that elephant in the room. We do really want to talk about it today, and it's something that can be addressed. And so when we talk about diabetes more and we spread ed- the awareness around it and we educate, whether it's our coworkers or family members or just those around us, just about what goes into managing diabetes and what kind of supportive environments that would help with helping you manage it as well, that can go a really long way with tackling that stigma. And so when we think about it, it might just be something as simple as the employer reaching out and putting up some posters around, Diabetes Month. There's a lot of great resources on the Diabetes Canada website that are super easy to put up around the work site. And it just kind of, again, starts those conversations of, what is diabetes and how does it sort of impact individuals, whether it's, a shift work or a day shift, or how can we create that supportive environment, as Matthew mentioned earlier, those protected meal times, or maybe it's even just knowing who you can kind of go to if you need to kind of manage the stress. What if it's even creating a community around you that's focused on stress management as a whole? Because we know that stress doesn't just impact those with chronic diseases, it's something that impacts us across the board. And so getting the rest of the workplace involved in that sometimes can be empowering. And so we're not just singling out those with diabetes, we are really creating this community and support that's on that track of balanced eating, mental health management, and creating that positive workplace.
I think it's important to emphasize that point on how this isn't just about diabetes specifically or just one particular condition. These types of workplace changes or things to emphasize are helpful for everyone with really any chronic condition or even those who don't. It's important to support things like protected meal times. It's important to protect things like just general flexibility where possible to make these things easier for people. It's a matter of just being there to support the overall health of employees. And even though diabetes is a more common chronic condition, impacting about 9.5% of the Canadian population, there are many other conditions where similar things would be helpful, would be appreciated, and will go to foster a supportive workplace. And with that, I think it's also important to consider the employer side, where this isn't just a matter of helping employees, and then some employers may feel that it's a negative on their end. These things also go a long way in improving employee productivity, in reducing absenteeism and presenteeism. If people are better able to manage chronic conditions, if people are better able to manage their overall health, then this can have positive benefits when it comes to workplace performance or even just, again, things like attendance. So I think it's important to also consider that it's a benefit for everyone.
Both of you brought up some really good pieces there on the company wellness aspect. So as we kind of close on this topic, we've touched a little bit today on the aspects. We have other podcasts as well to go into a lot more of these topics a lot more deeper. But as both of you, both of you are clinicians. What's maybe your go-to advice or your favorite piece of advice that you would either give to an employee managing diabetes at their workplace, or one tip for an employer to be more supportive?
I just wanted to kind of touch on all of the great points that were brought up on the importance of support. And so, on both the employer and employee side, having that support and creating an environment where both feel open to having a discussion around diabetes management. So, whether it's through, campaigns on the employee and or the employer side, I should say, whether it's like mindful Wednesdays, or we're creating a sort of a campaign where we're involving the workplace in engaging in self care, or maybe on the employee side, it's just having that conversation with your employer about what you would like to see in your workplace, or even understanding for yourself what would be most supportive for you, and maybe that can just be that first step, because like we said, this is a really big condition that we're managing. And so we want to make it less overwhelming, and just taking those few minutes for yourself and understanding, hey, what would I benefit from in my workplace, and not being afraid to ask for support. And there's lots of fantastic resources around workplace management and diabetes on Diabetes Canada. And so if you're looking for some toolkits or just some ideas on how you can even approach an employer about diabetes management, or from the employer side, if you're looking for some activities or campaigns or strategies that you can implement to create that supportive workplace, I would really encourage everyone to check those out, especially this month. And always remember that you're not alone. So, as Andrea mentioned, you have a whole team behind you. Never be afraid to ask, whether it's your doctor, another healthcare provider, certified diabetes educator. All have some very knowledgeable tools and tips that might help guide you on your journey.
Matthew.
I'll start with the employee side and then do employer. So on the employee side, I think one key thing is that it's important to recognize that medical based accommodations in the workplace are protected, and that can feel open about discussing ways in which there might be certain changes or benefits or accommodations that might be able to that might benefit you in managing whether it be diabetes or another chronic condition. And in conversations, being able to emphasize how it does help with things like your own productivity, helps with your own just ability to be both physically present and mentally present when it comes to completing your work, and just knowing that that is important, it is protected, and it is something that can be discussed. And I fully agree with Roshni about maybe prior to that, thinking about what do you truly need or what would benefit you in managing said condition. For some people, it might have to do with some aspects of flexibility. It might have to do with more protected times in the day. It might have to do with other things. But it's very important to think that through either by yourself or with a healthcare provider like a diabetes educator or your doctor, in ways in which things can be changed around to just help make things easier for you in managing your condition. And then for the employer side, I would say the importance of recognizing that these types of things in the workplace, whether it be more so the accommodation side of things, whether it be more workplace wellness types of things, while while it may seem that it has some upfront cost, whether that be monetary or things like these types of schedule changes, such stuff like that, recognizing that in the end it can go a long way in being a net benefit both for yourself and for employees. Helps with, again, things like employees being physically there more often, being more engaged in their work, having better work satisfaction, which also can go a long way in employee productivity and reducing things like turnover. Just recognizing the benefits all around for everyone, in addition to not just benefiting the health of employees and making things easier for them. It's great for everybody involved.
I'm also going to chime in here. Both of you kind of used a few of mine, but the piece is that this is hard. Managing a chronic condition, whether it be diabetes, whether it be other health conditions, is hard. It is not meant to be something, oh, just do this and it's super easy. And that's important for us to, it's okay that it's hard, and it's okay that there's going to be, we both talked about ebbs and flows, figuring it out, allowing the space and time to figure it out, what it looks like in at home with your family or in the workplace. That there's a lot of kind of figuring out, and both of you spoke about awareness um, along the way of just being okay that it is hard, and figuring out and taking one step at a time, because at the end of all of this, you are that person who's in control. You are the person who can do a lot actually to manage the health and well-being, and sometimes that's just speaking up and getting help. So we're going to leave it at that today. We've got some other podcast topics on diabetes, as well as those resources, Roshni, that you listed. We're going to list them on this podcast at the bottom as well, so people can look more into it. But yeah, thank you both for these kind of small, impactful things that people can do. If you know somebody living with diabetes who is struggling, think they would listen to this, or a caregiver or somebody please share. We love hearing from everybody. If you've got a comment, another topic that you want to talk about or hear us talk about, we would be happy to do so as well. So thank you both for joining us on this important topic for Diabetes Awareness Month.
Thank you so much. Grateful to have this conversation.